Hello everybody, I hope you're doing well. It's Lane here with MetaShackle. This is part 2 of a 2-part series. I released the first video last night, and today I'm going to be going over the ISO 222 token charts. So let's get into this. Anybody who keeps an eye on these charts and owns crypto knows that there has been an incredible amount of market manipulation going on. And when the manipulation hits extremes like what we're seeing now, it tends to throw off the data sets that we use to create charts to gather information. I was having a heck of a time going through these charts today because some of them just aren't working out. So I was literally having to just sit there and kind of stare at them and just really ponder on it to try to decide what the best potential was for that particular chart on a just chart by chart basis. Even though these cryptos generally run together in kind of a group, it's getting to the point where there's a lot of variance going on. But if you look at the charts overall, XRP has been holding up better than almost any other crypto. Now you can see that XRP is trading in this broadening wedge pattern here. On the internal wave count, we're now on the 4th wave. Now, one good sign is that we may have the bottom in is the fact that we have this pin bar showing. But I think that we will come down and at least touch this green line. But by using my grafting trading philosophy, marking out these two dojis here, these two weak dojis, creates this box right here, this potential liquidation area, which if we hit, this could be the bottom right through here. But at some point, we are going to see a reversal, and we're going to go up and challenge the upper trend line. We are going to set a new all-time high. Now the only question is whether or not the bottom is in at this point. But I do believe, regardless or not how much we go up once we do bounce, I still think that we are going to see a flash crash type event in the month of April, probably around mid-April, but nobody knows for sure. So this is looking pretty good. The only thing that keeps me a little bit on edge about this chart is the fact that this pin bar did not come down and sweep this low. So that's something that you're going to want to keep an eye on because this liquidation candle swept the previous low. This came down, swept this pattern, but at the same time, coming down here to the bottom of this pin bar actually swept the previous low here. So it doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be swept, but I would feel better if it would have been. But I think the XRP chart is looking really good. And even though XRP has gone down considerably since setting the all-time high, it is actually holding its value very well compared to a lot of the other cryptocurrencies. Now taking a look at the XLM chart, we can see quite a few differences here, especially on the tail end. Most times XLM and XRP basically trade together, but we're getting quite a bit of variance between the charts at this point. Now you can see that we are also on the internal wave count on wave 4, but the pin bar that we're seeing on the XLM chart actually swept the low of the liquidation candle, which indicates that this could potentially be the bottom. But I think that it will end up coming down to this green liquidation box as well. Now, there wasn't any clear weak dojis here, the exception of this one right there. And if you mark that off, we've actually tapped into that range, which is another indication that the bottom might be in, or at least really close. But if it does come down, I would expect it to come down to the negative 1.5 line right here, somewhere in this green liquidation box. If we break down past this, it will most likely be a liquidation candle similar to the one we're seeing right here. But odds are, if the bottom's in, we're going to head back to equilibrium. But I think we're going to see a big bounce here to the top of the range, pushing up towards equilibrium and this upper trend line. Quant is actually exhibiting the same symptoms that we were seeing on the XLM chart. The internal wave count is also on 4, and we have this pin bar that actually broke through the bottom of the lower trend line and swept all the liquidity from the entire pattern, which is a great sign. Now, if it does come down a little bit further, we have some weak dojis in this area right here that I've marked out with this liquidation box. So I would expect that even if we do come up a little bit and fall back down, that it would probably be similar to what we would see in XLM. We'd probably come right down to this liquidation box, but at some point, just like in XLM, we're going to see a move upwards, kind of acting as a trampoline of sorts. But the good thing is we're getting towards the end of this descending wedge, just like we are in XLM, and the space is running out, so it's going to have to make a choice. And the odds are this pattern is most likely going to break through this upper trend line, like XLM, and move back to equilibrium, which is this green line right here. This chart's looking pretty good. Now the Iota chart is one that I was actually struggling to get a read on today and had to take a little bit of time to kind of look into it and think about it for a while and then kind of come back to it here and there because some of these trend lines are just not clear like they generally are. So there's a couple different ways that they could be placed. This is ultimately the one I settled with. And like XLM and Quant, we're seeing a descending wedge pattern. We're also on the fourth wave in the internal wave count. Price came down today, swept the entire pattern, which is a great sign. We have a super weak doji right here, which could mark the sign of a bottom, as well as bouncing off the lower trend line and coming to the 3.5 Fibonacci line. Like XLM and Quant, there's a good chance that we could see a move up at this point, moving towards equilibrium, breaking through the upper trend line. Now, if it does continue to fall down, there's a couple weak dojis right here that I've marked out in the liquidation box, which could end up being the trampoline or the springboard to actually cause that move. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen today or tomorrow, but it's definitely running out of time because, like XLM and Quant, the space is very limited, which means the time frame is getting closer and closer and closer, and I doubt it's going to drag it out for too long. If we do kind of play around in here, at some point we're going to hit this range, and if we fall through that range, just like on the other charts, it might end up being something similar to this liquidation candle as well. But if you look at this chart overall for Iota, since the Trump pump, which started on November 3rd, Iota has fallen virtually all the way back almost to where the initial breakout was, nearly round tripping this entire move. This will definitely be one to keep your eye on, and if you hold Iota, this could potentially be a great time to accumulate more, especially where the fear and greed index is deep into the fear level. Now moving on to ADA. This is another one of the charts that was actually really hard to read. It wasn't very clear where to put this lower trend line. I decided in the end the best thing to do was just to ignore this liquidation candle. But it's interesting that it came down and bounced off the -3 Fibonacci line nearly perfectly. So we've also traded to the bottom of the range right here, set a pin bar in this area before that breakout, except the candle that we're forming now is not near as pinned as the other charts were, which in my opinion could potentially be telling us that it's going to come down even further. It hasn't swept this low, nor has it swept this low, which means that it still has some room to go down. I doubt that the algorithms are going to allow this to not sweep at least this low. And another thing that made it hard to deal with is the fact that there are no weak dojis over here. So my best guess was right around this area. Now, ADA is also a crypto that at the point of this liquidation candle here was getting pretty darn close to making a round trip. It's still not near as bad as Iota, but it's getting relatively close. One more move down or a major move down to this point could be damn near round tripping this entire move. But as we saw in this move right here, ADA also made the biggest breakout because originally the trend line was marked off at this point here for the upper trend line, and it broke out of that, being one of the only cryptos that did that during this move. So we know that ADA can move, and there's a lot of support behind it, especially now that Trump has mentioned it in the United States crypto reserve. So this is definitely one to keep your eye on. I think we could come down and bounce off this bottom trend line, at least taking out this low. I think this would be the area to watch that's most likely, but if it does continue down, it might break this lower trend line just like it did here, because it's shown two liquidation candles very similar to each other in nature. We could see something similar here tapping into this lower range, which might be a good time to accumulate more, especially to where we was just trading right around the $1.20 level a little over a week ago. So if price drops down to the 50-cent level, that could be a prime opportunity to add to your stack. Taking a look at the Algo chart, it has swept the previous low, sweeping all the sell side liquidity on the entire pattern. It is in a descending wedge pattern that also has an internal wave count that it's working on the number 4 wave, trading towards the bottom trend line where it actually touched it. Hopefully it will bounce off it. We have a pin bar right here. We have a couple clear weak dojis right here to mark out the liquidation box as well, which is a good sign. looking very similar to XLM and the Quant charts, but at the same time having similarities to Iota, because from the Trump pump breakout, Algo has nearly round-tripped this entire bullish move, trading down in this area now. There's very little profit left. Basically, it was trading at about 11 cents when the breakout happened, and it's now trading at about 18 cents. So it is less than 1x before the Trump pump. Before the Trump pump breakout, Algo was actually trading pretty close to 4-to-1 to XRP. And at the point that we are now, it's not even close. It's trading more like 10-to-1. So compared to XRP, Algo is not holding up well at all. And I actually hold a lot of Algo, and I'm fairly disappointed with the fact that I do at this point. I wish I would have put it in XLM instead. Taking a look at the H-bar chart, which is the most similar chart to XRP, it has a 5-wave internal wave count. It's trading in a broadening wedge pattern towards the bottom of the range. But unlike XRP, it nearly swept the previous low. This low was swept by this low, and this nearly swept this low. I think it's very likely that even though it's set a pin bar here, that we will at least see a move down to sweep the lows of this pattern. Now, if it does come down lower, we have some clear pin bars in this area marked out by this liquidation box right here. If it does come down, I would expect it to bottom somewhere in this range, maybe passing through this bottom trend line as we saw right here. And as it moves to equilibrium, having the upper trend line considerably above equilibrium, if this does make a run for this upper trend line, which I do believe that it's going to do, it's got a lot of work to do. And in doing so, we would see the price double. That would be awesome. The XRP and H-bar charts look fabulous. Doesn't mean they've bottomed. It looks like they could have, but time will tell. Moving on to XDC, this is also one of the charts that was very hard to get a read on, as it's been heavily manipulated. It came down and nearly swept the low of this liquidation candle set on February 3rd, but not quite. It's not really forming a pin bar, and XDC has generally been weaker than the other ISO 222 crypto tokens during the breakout. I think there's a really good chance that the price is going to come down, at least touch this lower trend line. And there are some clear weak dojis in this area right here that I marked out the liquidation box on. So this might be really close to bottoming out, and in the process of touching this liquidation box would also sweep this pattern low, which would be another good sign. Now you'll notice this upper trend line is not touching the pattern. I'm of the opinion that this internal wave count is not accurate at this point, and that this may actually be counting as a 2 rather than a 4, unless you count this as 1, 2, 3, 4. But at this point, I'm going to keep it at a 2, even though it may actually be a 4, just because it's so hard to get a read on it. But just like the other charts, it's trading well below equilibrium, and if we do break out of this range right here, it's going to be very challenging for it to overcome that equilibrium. XDC does not have a lot of strength behind it, even in big moves, but that could easily change at the flip of a switch. But it will be one to keep your eye on, especially in this price range, if you're planning on adding to your stack, if this is one of the cryptos that you've invested in or would like to purchase. Now taking a look at the Ando chart, it's also trading in a descending wedge pattern. From the Trump breakout, this is actually the worst round tripper. Luckily, it's formed a pin bar, but it's actually popped out towards the bottom of the lower wedge, which means there's a really good chance that it's actually going to come down to this green box right here and make a full round trip, basically negating this entire Trump pump move. So anybody that held through this basically lost every dime of their profit that they held. I still think Ando has a bright future ahead of it, but it's really unfortunate that it was unable to hold any of the profits. But the good thing is that it did sweep this low and the previous low. I had to go backwards on the chart a little bit to find where to put the liquidation box, but I finally settled right in this area, which essentially would be the full round trip. But at the same time, having made a full round trip and having also demonstrated the ability to make a huge move like this might be a great time to buy it. But anybody who bought up in this upper range around the $2 level has lost a substantial amount of their money. So if you're one of those people, it might not be a bad idea to add to your stack as much as you can, especially in that 60-cent level. That's all I have for you today. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for watching this video. Good luck, and have a great day.